You're only a mail order bride. Hi, Filipina Wife here. Welcome back. Can a Filipina and her husband's relationship survive when there's limited trust? What happens when the American treats his wife with disrespect and contempt? Well, that's a subject of our story today. So, Jessica is a 45-year-old Filipina who married to Matthew, a 62-year-old American from Phoenix, Arizona. They have been married for 3 years, and Jessica arrived in the US under a CR1 visa. Now, Jessica is what's known as a Filipina turtle. She never had a serious boyfriend until she met her husband, and she was always leery of men in general. She had a very cautious approach to romantic relationships that caused her to move very slowly and also drove away prospective partners. Meanwhile, both of her parents had passed away recently, and the one desired for their daughter was for her to be happily married. As she hit the age of 40, she realized that her approach to love was leading her down a path of loneliness. So she decided that it was time to find a man and get married. So she went online to several dating sites and connected with any man that was at least 40 years old. And after a couple of months, she began having conversations with Matthew. So Matthew love bombed her for the first few months, like sending her flowers, talking to her every day, and even made arrangements to visit her in the Philippines. Her friends and neighbors were very excited for Jessica, and they encouraged her to make Matthew her husband. So, on Matthew's second trip in the Philippines, he stayed there for a month and then they got married. And 10 months later, Jessica moved to Phoenix with Matthew and starting her new life as a wife. At first, things seemed to be going well. Matthew and Jessica traveled around the US and he made sure that Jessica was really comfortable in her surroundings. But this is also when the red flags started to appear. Matthew wanted to see what and who she was communicating with via her social media and messenger, like he'd asked to borrow her phone and scrolled through to see if there were any messages or communications. But Jessica never had a boyfriend before and really didn't think much about it. She wasn't communicating with anyone in a romantic or nefarious way, so she didn't really care at all. But over time, Matthew began questioning her every time she went out and discouraging her from getting a job. He questioned everything, like from ingredients that went into dinner to when was the last time she had dusted the house to what she'd talk about with her friends, at church. On the contrary, when Jessica asked Matthew about his communications and, about the kids, the finances, or even where he'd been in the evenings, he was vague and often became confrontational. So this made Jessica feel uncomfortable, but wasn't serious enough to argue about. She was happy to be married and was willing to accept Matthew's flaws to ensure, a happy home. Matthew and Jessica were not that wealthy but lived a comfortable middle class life. Matthew had some savings but never told Jessica how much. Matthew was about 2 years from his retirement, and his plan was to buy a mountain home outside of Phoenix. And that day came. Matthew and Jessica found their dream home and they decided to purchase it. No, Jessica had been in the US for a couple of years and was becoming familiar with the US customs and practices and laws. So, when buying a house, she asked the Filipino community or friends what type of questions she'd ask and what she should be aware of when, dealing with this kind of process. So, while there was a lot of good feedback given, there was general consensus that she'd make sure that her name was on the deed. So she went to closing with her husband and his adult son one day, and this is where the twist of the story begins. She didn't understand what was happening or why her stepson was signing documents. She stayed quiet during the closing, and on the drive back home, she questioned her husband why his son was there. Now, the husband explained that he put a house in his son's name for financial planning reasons. He wanted to protect the assets in case he came down with illness, and he wanted a house to go to his son after he died without having to worry about the inheritance tax. This absolutely freaked Jessica out. It finally occurred to her that this was not their house, but his house, and it was not concern of her well-being if he passed away. It was unusual for Jessica to challenge her husband, but she'd had enough. After telling him how hurt she was, Matthew's response to her, and I quote, "You're only a mail order bride."
You're only a mail order bride.
And also, he said that his son is the only family he's got. Jessica was devastated, of course. If this is what married life like was, then she wishes she was single, living alone in the Philippines right now. But she realized she'd rushed into this relationship, which was exactly what she was trying to avoid all those years before getting married. She married someone who treated her as something less than an equal. Well, Jessica and Matthew are still married and they're still planning on moving into that mountain house. However, the damage has been done to the marriage, and Jessica no longer looks at him as her savior and partner. She looks at him as another man that she should be leery of and whose intentions may not be honorable. Well, I'm not sure that Matthew knows how Jessica feels or even cares, but I feel sorry for both of them at this point. I tell everyone about the story, just a warning that Filipinos should be cautious of foreigners who love bomb them at the start of their relationship. You'll never know if they truly love you or simply want to control you while disregarding your feelings. And you, Americans out there looking for older Filipinas who've never had a serious relationship, you run the risk of having a woman who's more interested in getting married than who she's marrying to. Well, guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Please hit a like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already done so. And again, next week, see you with another interesting story or video. Bye, guys.